I still can't believe this happened, but here's the thing. Sometimes life just throws you into the weirdest, most unexpected situations. And somehow, those moments turn out to be the ones you remember the most. Like, imagine checking into a hotel for a work trip, minding your own business, and suddenly realizing you're sharing a room with a complete stranger. And not just any stranger, the guy you kind of secretly thought was cute the one time you saw him at a conference months ago. Yeah, that happened to me last week, so let me back up a little. I was headed to this big industry conference in Chicago, my first real trip since forever, thanks to the pandemic and all that. I booked my hotel through the company, and honestly, I wasn't expecting anything fancy. Just a clean bed, a decent Wi-Fi connection, and maybe a mini fridge to stash some snacks. Nothing glamorous. When I got to the hotel, the lobby was packed with other attendees, all chatting about the sessions, swapping business cards, or just trying to look busy. I was exhausted from the flight, so I didn't pay much attention, just wanted to get to my room and crash. The front desk clerk handed me a key card and said, "Room 724. I thanked him and headed for the elevator, plugging my headphones in and scrolling through my phone to kill time. When I got to the 7th floor, I walked down the hallway looking for 724, and there it was, right next to the stairwell. I swiped my card, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. That's when I froze. Because sitting on the edge of the bed, casually flipping through a conference brochure, was this guy the first recognized instantly. Tall, with messy, dark hair, wearing one of those smart casual button-ups that made him look both approachable and effortlessly put together. He glanced up, eyes widening in surprise, and then gave me this half grin, like he wasn't sure if this was a joke or some kind of nightmare. You're in my room," I blurted out, feeling a little awkward. He shrugged, standing up as I closed the door behind me. "Apparently, so are you." I laughed nervously, trying to figure out what was going on. Turns out the hotel had overbooked or messed up the reservations, and both of us had been assigned the same room number. Classic mix-up. I was already picturing the whole night getting sorted out. Reception would find us another room, or we'd just switch keys, and that would be the end of it. But then he said something unexpected. "Honestly, I don't mind staying here. The other rooms are a mess. And, well, I'm kind of glad it's you." That caught me off guard. I mean, who says something like that to a complete stranger? There was something about his tone. Relaxed, maybe a little amused, and definitely sincere. I felt my cheeks warm up, trying to play it cool. "Well, I'm glad you're easygoing," I said, setting my bag down. "Because I'm not sure I want to sleep on the couch. We're in the lobby." He laughed, walking over to the window. "Yeah, that sounds terrible. Plus, it's only for one night. We can survive." That's when I realized this wasn't going to be a boring, forgettable hotel mishap. Somehow, sharing a room with this guy was about to turn into something way more interesting than I expected. And honestly, I didn't hate the idea. So there we were, two guys stuck in the same hotel room, both a little baffled but oddly comfortable with the situation. I glanced around, taking in the space a bit more standard hotel room, one queen bed, a tiny desk with a lamp, a TV mounted on the wall, and a bathroom that didn't look too bad. The air had that faint hotel scent, clean but with a hint of old carpet. "I'm Jason," I said, holding out my hand like it was somehow the polite thing to do in this weird moment. He smiled and shook it. "Eli, nice to meet you, roomie." I chuckled. "Roomie, huh? I guess if you're going to end up sharing a space with a stranger, it might as well be someone who sounds like he could be my favorite roommate." Eli leaned back on the bed, propping himself up on his elbows. "So Jason, what's your deal? What do you do besides show up at the wrong hotel room?" I laughed, feeling the tension ease a little. "I'm in marketing. It's mostly spreadsheets and emails, but I get to travel occasionally, so it's not all bad. You?" He shrugged. "Graphic designer. Freelance mostly, but been working on a couple of pretty big projects lately. This conference is kind of a mix of networking and stealing ideas." He grinned like he was joking, but I knew that competitive edge all too well. We fell into a rhythm pretty fast, like two old friends catching up rather than two strangers forced into close quarters. Eli tossed me the remote, and I flicked the TV on, flipping through the news while he pulled out his laptop to check some emails. Neither of us minded the quiet, which was surprising because I usually hate silence with new people. After a few minutes, Eli leaned over and whispered, Want to order some food? I'm starving. Absolutely, I said, already craving anything that wasn't airport snacks. We ended up texting the front desk to recommend nearby delivery options and agreed on Thai food. While waiting, Eli started talking about this art show he'd been invited to next week in New York, sharing stories about the artists and the crazy things that happen at those events. I listened, genuinely interested, surprised at how easily the conversation flowed. When the food arrived, we made a little picnic on the floor because the bed was just one, and honestly, it felt a bit weird to eat there together. We joked about how this might be the most unromantic date ever, sharing a hotel room by accident while scarfing down pad thai in a cramped space. But as we ate, I caught myself stealing glances at Eli. He had this way of smiling that was both warm and a little shy, like he wasn't used to just being himself around someone new. And his eyes? They were this deep, dark brown that caught the light in a way that made me forget what I was saying mid-sentence. At some point, the conversation drifted to dating, which felt inevitable given the vibe between us. Eli was surprisingly open, talking about the usual ups and downs, the awkward first dates, and the time he accidentally stood up a guy because he misread the message and thought it was a prank. I shared a few embarrassing stories of my own, like the time I showed up to a date in a neon shirt only to find out the venue had a strict dress code. We laughed until our sides hurt, and I realized how rare it was to feel this connected with someone so quickly. Later, we cleared the food plates and sat on the bed, still talking, the TV forgotten. The room felt smaller, warmer, like a bubble where nothing else mattered except the two of us sharing stories, jokes, and quiet moments. At one point, Eli looked at me and said softly, "You know, I almost didn't want to switch rooms because I was kind of hoping I'd get to meet you." I swallowed hard, surprised by how much that line hit me. "Yeah, me too." We both laughed nervously, the air thickening with something unspoken. The usual awkwardness of meeting someone new vanished, replaced by this electric tension that made my heart beat faster. Then came the moment I wasn't sure I was ready for. Eli shifted closer, and I noticed how close our knees were, almost touching. His eyes searched mine, like he was trying to find permission, or maybe just hoping I'd meet him halfway. I could feel the heat rising in my face, my hands suddenly clammy. Was this real? Was this happening? Sharing a hotel room by mistake, and now it felt like something else entirely was starting to unfold. "I don't usually do this," Eli murmured, "but I'm glad this mix-up happened." Neither of us moved for a beat, the silence louder than before. Then, without thinking, I reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead. His eyes fluttered closed for a second, and when they opened again, they were softer, more vulnerable. "Neither do I admitted. "But maybe sometimes the best things come from the biggest mistakes." We were still sitting there when my phone buzzed with a text from the front desk. Apparently they'd found a room for one of us to switch to. I looked at Eli, waiting to see if he'd want to take it. He shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. "I'm staying right here." And just like that, the accidental hotel room mix-up became the start of something way more than either of us expected. I guess accepting that he wasn't moving out meant we had to figure out the logistics, right? I mean, one bed, two guys, and an awkward hotel room wasn't exactly designed for this kind of arrangement. But honestly, after everything we'd already been through that evening, I didn't care all that much about the space situation. Eli just looked at me and said, "You okay with this?" I could tell he was trying to sound casual, but there was a flicker of nervousness behind his easy smile. I nodded. "Yeah, I'm okay. Honestly, this feels kind of right." We spent the next hour just talking in low voices, trying not to wake the other guests in the hall. It turned out Eli had a thing for late-night conversations. He said the quiet made it easier to open up. I agreed. We swapped stories about growing up in small towns, the weird quirks of our families, and the funny things that happen when you move to a big city for the first time. At some point, the conversation slowed, and the silence felt different. Comfortable, not awkward. Then I noticed Eli shifting, casting a glance at the bed, then back at me. "You want to?" he started, voice barely above a whisper. I smiled. "Yeah, I think I do." Making room on one side of the bed, I scooted over, and he followed. It was weirdly intimate, the way his warmth seeped through his shirt, the way our shoulders brushed. We laid there side by side, the city lights glowing faintly through the curtains, and for a moment, none of us spoke, just breathing in the quiet. Then he reached out, fingers hesitating before finding mine. I squeezed gently, and he smiled in the dark. "I'm glad this happened," he said again, quieter this time. "Me too," I whispered back. Sleep didn't come easy. I kept replaying the evening in my head, how something that started as a total mix-up had turned into this unexpected connection. Every so often, I'd catch Eli watching me, those dark eyes soft and full of something I couldn't quite name yet. The next morning, we woke up later than either of us planned, the kind of late you get when you finally let yourself rest. Breakfast was supposed to be a quick thing before the conference started, but instead, we ended up at a tiny coffee shop across the street, sitting close over steaming mugs and laughing about how ridiculous our situation was. "You know," Eli said, "this might be the strangest first date ever." "Agreed," I said, "but maybe the best one." The conference was a blur after that. Every time I thought about our accidental roommate situation, I smiled like an idiot. Eli and I kept running into each other between sessions, and neither of us pretended it wasn't a little electric. We exchanged numbers, texted during breaks, and made plans to meet up for dinner. That night, we found ourselves back in that same hotel room, this time not by accident, but on purpose. The space felt different, warmer, more ours. As we talked about everything and nothing, I realized how rare it was to find someone who made the chaos of life feel a little calmer. I'm not usually the type to believe in fate or signs, but maybe sometimes, just sometimes, a room mix-up is exactly what you need. That night, as the city lights spilled through the curtains and the hum of distant cars filled the background, Eli and I sat on the edge of the bed, closer than before but still giving each other space. We'd spent the day swapping stories, laughing over inside jokes, and stealing glances that lingered just a second too long. But now, in this quiet moment, there was something unspoken hanging in the air. I caught Eli's eye, and for a second, it felt like the whole world had narrowed down to just us. "You know," I began, my voice a little quieter than usual, "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm really glad this mess-up happened." He smiled, that same soft smile that had been growing more familiar with every hour. "Me too. It's weird how life throws you curveballs, huh?" "Yeah," I agreed, feeling my heart thump a little faster. "Sometimes the best things come from the strangest situations." Eli shifted closer, just a bit, and the warmth radiating off him was impossible to ignore. I swallowed hard, suddenly aware of every tiny detail, the way his eyes held mine, the slight curve of his lips, the casual way his hand rested near mine on the bedspread. The room seemed to shrink around us, but in a good way. It was like we'd created our own little bubble, separate from the crowded hotel and the busy conference. "I'm not great at this," Eli admitted, breaking the silence. "Flirting, I mean. It's been a while since I actually liked someone enough to want to try." That caught me off guard, and for a moment, I was stunned into silence. "I get that," I said honestly. "Same here. I'm usually pretty terrible at this stuff." He laughed softly, a sound that made my chest tighten. "Maybe we're both terrible, but we're terrible together." The idea of that made me grin. Terrible, but somehow it feels right. We sat there for a while, just talking, until the conversation drifted toward the future. Work plans, upcoming trips, things we wanted to do when we weren't stuck sharing a hotel room by accident. It was easy to imagine those possibilities with him, even though we'd only just met. The thought was both exciting and terrifying. Later, as we settled into the bed, the awkwardness of sharing a space started to fade. Eli reached over, brushing a stray hair away from my forehead, and I felt a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the room's heater. His touch was gentle, careful, like he was testing the waters. "Is this okay?" he asked softly. I nodded, words failing me. The way he looked at me, like he was searching for an answer in my eyes, made my heart race. I reached up, my hand finding his, and squeezed gently. "Yeah," I whispered. "It's more than okay." That night, we fell asleep side by side for the first time, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. The city buzzed outside, but inside that hotel room, There was only the quiet rhythm of two people discovering something new, something real. The next morning, reality crept back in. The conference was ending, and we'd have to go back to our separate lives. But for those few days, sharing that room, sharing those moments, we'd found something neither of us expected. And maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something worth holding on to. The last day of the conference came with this weird mix of excitement, and that sinking feeling you get when you know something good is about to end. Eli and I had spent the morning swapping business cards and awkwardly smiling at people we barely knew, but every time our eyes met across the crowded lobby or the conference hall, there was this little spark that didn't go unnoticed. It was like our accidental hotel room was a secret we both carried with us, grounding us in an otherwise hectic weekend. After the final session wrapped up, we found ourselves back at the hotel, standing in the hallway outside our room. I was clutching my suitcase handle a bit tighter than necessary, not quite ready to say goodbye. So, Eli said, kicking at a loose thread on the carpet, "What's the plan now that we're about to go back to real life?" I inhaled deeply, trying to figure out how to put what I was feeling into words without sounding like a total goof. Honestly, I don't really want this to be just a weird story I tell later about that time two strangers shared a room. He looked up, eyes hopeful but cautious. Neither do I. It was tempting to just lean in right there, say a stupid joke, or maybe something a little braver, but I settled for a smile instead. "You want to grab a coffee before we head out? One last accidental hangout?" Eli's grin was all the answer I needed. "Yeah, let's do that." The coffee shop was quiet compared to the buzz of the conference, a perfect little spot to soak in the moment. We sat across from each other, a little more casual now, as if the walls between us had come down a bit more. The conversation was easy, flowing like it had from the start, but there was this unspoken tension, like both of us were waiting for one of the other to say the thing we both wanted to hear. So, Eli began, twirling his coffee cup. "Do you think this was just a crazy coincidence? Or do you believe in, I don't know, fate?" I shrugged, smiling despite the sudden nervousness. "I've never been the fate type. But I'm starting to think maybe some accidents are worth hanging on to." He laughed softly, that easy, warm sound I was quickly growing addicted to. "I like that. Accidents worth holding on to." We laughed together for a moment, and then Eli reached across the table, his hand brushing against mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't pull away. Instead, I held his hand, feeling the steady warmth of his skin. "Look," he said quietly, "I'm probably going to be all over the place the next few weeks with work and stuff, but I'd really like to see where this goes. Whatever this is." My heart was pounding, but I nodded. "Yeah, me too." That night, back at the hotel, we packed up our things but moved slowly, neither of us eager to break the spell of those last few hours together. When it was finally time to leave, Eli surprised me by pulling me into a hug that felt like it was trying to say more than words ever could. "Promise me something?" he whispered. "Anything. Let's not let this be just a story we tell about a crazy hotel mix-up. Let's actually see what happens." I smiled against his shoulder. "Promise." As I walked away with my suitcase, I caught one last glance of Eli standing in the hallway, that easygoing smile still lighting up his face. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Sometimes the weirdest accidents turn into the best stories, and maybe, just maybe, they're the start of something real. Back home, the humdrum of daily life hit me harder than I expected. Waking up in my own bed, making coffee alone, scrolling through emails, it all felt a little emptier without Eli around. I kept reaching for my phone, half expecting a message from him, some silly meme, or even just a quick, "Hey, how's your day?" It wasn't like we'd been together long, but that accidental room share had cracked open something unexpected, and now the silence felt heavier. I tried to keep busy, work, friends, Netflix, but my mind kept wandering back to Chicago, to those stolen moments in that tiny hotel room. I even found myself rereading the texts we'd exchanged since we left. They were casual, friendly, but beneath the surface there was this thread of anticipation, like both of us were holding our breath, waiting to see if this could turn into something real. A few days later, Eli hit me up with a simple message. Got some free time this weekend. Want a video chat? My heart did a little jump, and I typed back almost instantly. Absolutely. That call felt like a lifeline. Seeing his face on my screen, hearing his voice, it was like a tether back to that weekend. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, sharing jokes, venting about work, and even debating over which superhero movie was the best. He's firmly Team Iron Man, and I'm quietly rooting for Captain America. It wasn't perfect. There were those awkward pauses where we both looked down at our phones or windows. But it was real, and it felt good. Over the next few weeks, we fell into a kind of rhythm. Texts in the morning, calls in the evening, the occasional surprise package of snacks or books arriving at my door. We were building something, careful and tentative, but growing stronger with every conversation. Then came the invitation that made my stomach flip. "I'm going to be in New York next weekend," Eli said one night during a video call. "Would you want to meet up? Like in person?" I blinked at the screen, heart thudding so loud I was sure he could hear it. "Yeah," I said, voice a little shaky. "I'd like that." We spent the next few days planning, trying to figure out logistics without making it seem like a huge deal. But for me, it was massive. Meeting Eli in person again, outside of that accidental hotel room, outside of pixelated screens, it felt like stepping into the unknown, but somehow feeling safer than ever. The day I flew to New York, my nerves were all over the place. What if it was awkward? What if the spark didn't translate? But the moment I saw Eli waiting for me at the airport, that familiar, easy smile lighting up his face, all the doubts melted away. We spent the weekend exploring the city, getting lost in tiny bookstores, sharing coffee at hole-in-the-wall cafes, laughing over bad pizza, and stealing quiet moments on park benches. The city was loud and chaotic, but with Eli, it felt like we had our own little bubble again. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, casting everything in a soft golden glow, we found ourselves sitting close on a bench in Central Park. He reached over, fingers entwining with mine, and I felt that same warmth from Chicago, that same quiet certainty. "Feels like this is just the beginning," he whispered. I nodded, squeezing his hand. "Yeah, the best kind of accident." And in that moment, I knew that sometimes life's biggest mix-ups aren't mistakes at all. They're the start of something worth holding on to. After that weekend in New York, things between Eli and me started to feel less like a thrilling secret and more like a real relationship. Messy, uncertain, and totally worth it. We both had our own lives, jobs, and cities, so the idea of "what are we?" hung in the air more often than I'd like to admit. But every time we talked, every time we found ourselves laughing over late-night video calls or planning the next trip, it felt like we were building something steady, even if it was miles apart. One night, about a month after New York, I was lying on my couch, scrolling through my phone, when Eli's name popped up. "Got a surprise for you," was all the message said. I raised an eyebrow, curiosity piqued. "What kind of surprise?" "Wait and see," he replied, adding a winking emoji. I sent back a laughing face, but couldn't help wondering what he was up to. A few days later, out of the blue, I got a package at my apartment. Inside was a small sketchbook. On the cover, his name handwritten, and a note, "Some doodles for you. Hope they make you smile." I flipped through the pages and found little drawings of cityscapes, coffee cups, and even a cartoon version of us sharing that accidental hotel room. Somewhere between the pages was a sketch of two guys sitting on a bench, holding hands under a sunset, the one from Central Park. My chest tightened, and I couldn't help but smile like an idiot. That small gesture felt like the kind of thing that said, "I'm here. I'm thinking about you. Maybe this could be something real." We kept the momentum going, carving out time for weekend visits, video calls that stretched into the early hours, and endless texts that made my phone light up with little moments of joy. But with that joy came the inevitable questions, the ones about the future, what we wanted, and what we were willing to risk. One evening, after a particularly long call where neither of us wanted to say goodbye, Eli surprised me with a confession. "Jason, I hate the distance more than I thought I would. I want more than texts and weekends." I felt the weight of his words, the vulnerability behind them. Me too. I've been thinking the same. The conversation shifted to what more looked like for us. Did we want to try making one city home? Could we handle the changes that came with that? It wasn't easy, and I won't lie. I was scared. Change is messy, and it's terrifying to leap into the unknown, especially when you're used to doing your own thing. But Eli's voice was steady, passionate. I want to try, Jason. I want to see if this accidental thing, the mistake that brought us together, can actually turn into something real, something lasting. I took a deep breath and, for once, stopped overthinking. I'm in. Fast forward a couple of months, and I found myself moving into Eli's apartment in a neighborhood I'd never been to before, surrounded by unfamiliar streets and new routines. It was strange at first, sharing space, figuring out how two lives merged into one, but it was also thrilling. We had our moments of tension, of course, who left the lights on, whose turn it was to do the dishes, but mostly, it felt like home. One chilly Saturday morning, as we were making coffee in the tiny kitchen, Eli teased me about my terrible taste in music. I laughed and grabbed his hand, pulling him close. You know, I said, I never thought sharing a hotel room by accident would lead to this. He grinned, eyes sparkling. Neither did I, but I'm glad it did. There was something about that simple truth that summed up everything. The chaos, the uncertainty, the unexpected turns that somehow felt like fate in disguise. Maybe, in the end, the best things in life are the ones you never planned for. It's funny how life works sometimes. The way a simple mistake can turn into something you never expected, but end up being exactly what you needed all along. Looking back on that first night in the hotel room, the mix-up that threw two strangers together, I wouldn't change a thing. Because it was messy and awkward and uncertain, but it was real. And it brought me Eli now, sitting here in our shared apartment, with the morning light filtering through the curtains and the sound of his laughter from the other room. I feel something I haven't felt in a long time. A quiet, steady sense of rightness. It's not fireworks every day, and it's not perfect. We still have our disagreements over whose turn it is to do dishes or what movie to watch on Friday nights. There are moments when the newness wears off, and life gets complicated. But there's also this deep comfort in knowing that I'm not alone. Eli. And I talk often about that accidental hotel room, how bizarre it was, how unlikely. We joke that the universe must have been messing with us, but we both know it was something more. It was a chance to be vulnerable, to let someone in when neither of us expected to. And from that, something lasting took root. Sometimes I catch myself smiling for no reason, or suddenly feeling grateful just because he's there, making a cup of coffee or singing off key in the shower. These everyday moments, the small and quiet ones, have become the ones I cherish most. We're still figuring things out, still learning how to live together in this imperfect, beautiful way. And that feels enough. Because at the end of the day, it's not about a perfect story or sweeping romance. It's about finding someone who makes the accidental parts of life feel like home. So yeah, we were stuck sharing a hotel room by mistake. But somehow, that mistake turned into the best thing that ever happened to me. And honestly, I'm grateful for every unexpected twist that led me to him.